Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you to our panel for being here. You have the joy of having three senators who care strongly about the Southwest Chief on this committee. So our focus, I'm sorry, to the other two witnesses, seemed to be on two other folks. Let me start with Mr. Souby. You mentioned an equation that doesn't take into account benefits to communities that are served by long-distance passenger rail service. Where does that equation come from? Is that something that Amtrak has developed on its own volition, or is that statutory? Or
No. The Rail Passengers Association, which is a national group, I served on their board until just recently. I'm a national representative now. Did research. They went to the Trent-Lott Institute because we worked on that for the Gulf Coast possible resumption of service. We went back to them because they do a very good job on this analysis. But they then went out and looked, as I recall, they looked at 11 or some odd.
Let me make sure you understand my question is, you tell me that Amtrak is using this particular equation that
No, they're not.
One thing.
I'm recommending that they should.
Correct,
Yes,
but where do they get the authority? Where did they make the decision to use that equation that they use?
In any evaluation of, particularly of a long-distance line. In other words,
Is that a legislative mandate on Amtrak?
I think it should be part of a policy framework, as I mentioned earlier. It should be that policy framework should say we're going to maintain a national system. We're going to maintain this underlying set of highly valued long-distance train service, and we're going to grow the expansion of our national rail network based on that existing network. And when decisions are made about how to establish additional service, then we should take into account not just passenger demand, but also the benefits to communities.
I understand fully your point and agree with that. Let me turn to Mr. Anderson so that I can turn my fire to somebody that I disagree with less than I thought I used to, but still disagree with. Mr. Anderson, you set the stage for my skepticism about your view toward the Southwest Chief and long-distance passenger service when we had a conversation with you and my colleagues, and you indicated there was in the planning stages, or at least thought process at Amtrak, a replacement of long-distance passenger service on the Southwest Chief from Dodge City, Kansas to Albuquerque using bus service. My reaction, I never intended when I met with you, I was annoyed by Amtrak's failure to pay the $3 million that I believe they committed to in a grant process for the Southwest Chief. That's what originated my outreach to you. But it was the bus comment that caught my attention and has stayed with me. And the idea that Amtrak would think about replacing passenger service with bus service for 400 miles and believe that we would still have a long-distance passenger train service is something I can't get over, because it tells me your attitude toward that line, or maybe toward long-distance, non-profitable passenger service. So I'll say a few more things before the chairman determines my time is gone, but I'm anxious for you to assure me that my perception about your belief in regard to this is erroneous. And in that regard, what I would add to my question or comment is, can you reassure me that you will follow the law? Can you assure me that if you followed the law, that long-distance or non-profitable passenger train service would continue? And in the letter that Senator Gardner read to you, that you claim credit for that paragraph, which is pretty appealing to me, is there anything in that letter that I should be concerned about, that you are using hedge words or things that give you greater flexibility than I think you're conveying by what you're saying today?
First of all, we brought the issue, look, you're my boss, okay? So Congress decides what our funding is, you decide the policy. I keep a laminated copy of the policy with me at all times, because the best thing to do, given how many of you are up here on the Hill, is to just tell people that you follow the law. And the law is fairly straightforward in terms of what our mission is.
So in what the law allows you to do, what do I need to be worried about that you might do in regard to the reduction in service on the Southwest Chief?
Well, look, you've been clear on the Southwest Chief, and we're headstrong in terms of using the $50 million. We've leveraged the $50 million, I think I told you when we met, to $90 million. But look, it still has three big problems, and we shouldn't run from these problems. It needs to have PTC. I fundamentally disagree with him, And I don't think anybody should tell rural America that they have a lower level of safety than urban America, and that their trains are not going to have the kind of technology that the Northeast Corridor has. That happened in aviation. We had a whole series of accidents, and Congress changed, Oberstar changed the law. So I disagree with that. And I bet that the NTSB disagrees with that. So that's number one. You've got to fund what has to be funded to operate that railroad safely, and it needs $100 million of investment. We don't have that $100 million. I have an OMB and a Secretary of Transportation that has a different view of my budget than I do. I agree with all of you that we need to invest in a national railroad network, but we've got to have the funding. We have got to fix on-time performance, because you cannot hope to sustain this service if at the Southwest Chief with the kind of continual deterioration on-time performance.
I'll take that you want to increase and improve the service, but there are no hedge words in that paragraph. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Moran.